We have a panel now on challenges and future of AI ML ecosystem in India. It's a grandiosely worded panel. Oh, hi, Chiru. Please, if you don't mind. So, so far in the day, we have constrained the Q&A to be kind of at the end. I'm hoping that we shake things up a little bit here, get everyone talking. So I will have the panelists please sit down. I'll introduce all of you one by one. Ashish Chandulkar, he's an ML engineer in Google Cloud. He's passionate about solving real life problems with ML and spreading ML education. Anirban Dasgupta, associate professor, IIT Gandhinagar. Anirban is BTech CSE from IIT KGP and PhD from Cornell. His research interests are randomized algorithms, especially for numerical linear algebra, social network modeling, and other ML problems with an algorithmic flavor. He is supported by faculty grants from Google and Cisco. Shaurya Roy. Thanks for being active in the Q&A, by the way. Now I guess it's your turn to answer the questions. Shaurya Roy is leading the Big Data Labs for American Express. This is a group of about 20 research scientists and engineers working in various areas of AI and ML for predictive analytics problems arising in the context of financial services. Srinivas Raghav Kashyap. Srinivas is senior engineer in the Research and Machine Intelligence Group at Google in Bangalore. He has a PhD in computer science from the University of Maryland, College Park. At Google, Srinivas has been part of various teams like ads, search, and is now part of Google Research. In a life before Google, he worked at, guess where? IBM Research in New York and Bell Labs. Chiranjeev Bhattacharya, is on the Faculty of Computer Science and Automation, IISc, Bangalore. He works on ML and has published extensively in the leading journals and conferences. Thank you, everyone, for making it to this panel. So, as I said, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask a few questions. I'm going to ask the panel one by one, or at least to one or more of the panel, and then I'll ask the same question to all of you. And I think this is a wonderful gathering of folks from academia, industries, small industry, big industry. And so I'm sure all of you have some viewpoint or the other. So my first question is to Ashish. Ashish works in Google Cloud. As part of that, he goes and tries to sell Google Cloud platform to various companies, big and small. So he has a wonderful perspective on the sorts of problems that Indian industry is trying to solve. So what are some key opportunities that Indian companies and the government are looking at AI to do for them? Ashish. Oh, let's give our panel mic too. For now, we'll manage by passing this.
Thanks for inviting me to the panel. And so when I go to the field, I see a lot of interesting use cases. Most of the use cases recently we find mostly in the area of vision plus speech. And people want to really solve difficult problems. And sometimes expectations are pretty unrealistic.
Can you speak up, Ashish? You're
Sure.
usually not this quiet.
Okay.
Ashish and I work together. So
sure. So usually people want to, is it better?
I don't know.
Better? Okay. People want to solve harder problem using machine learning platforms, mostly in the area of vision and speech. Sometimes expectations are completely unrealistic. So once I was, joke later. Once I was told by someone that they want to recognize a person with a burqa on. It's completely impossible. If computer can't see the person's face, it's impossible for them to recognize. Other use cases we are seeing a lot in the banking space. In last 2 years, I have seen a lot of tenders from banks for building enterprise fraud management system. So that's another story where people are trying to use structured data to come up with fraud detection kind of a model. Vision API or image-related problems people are trying to solve mostly in asset security. For example, electric companies are worried about fire, and they want to monitor the electric lines and find out where are the fire incidences, want to predict those fire incidences and secure the assets. So those are some of the other things. Other applications I see in the area of smart cities, where people are trying to come up with the plan for transportation and laying down urban infrastructure. So those are some of the problems I'm seeing in the field these days.
Thanks, Ashish. Anyone else from the panel wants to? Yeah, go ahead, Shoaib.
Okay. So I'm coming from the financial domain, so I'll talk about the financial domain application. So in the morning, Rajan mentioned a few use cases. Also, Ashish now kind of touched upon some of the use cases in financial domain. So financial companies have been using machine learning for quite some time in some form or the other for doing, again, risk management, marketing, whom to target, whom not to target. And so they're like a whole bunch of binary prediction problem throughout a financial journey of a financial product, right? But so there, I mean, in general, that is kind of known, and people are using all sorts of different techniques, machine learning techniques, predictive techniques, building on open source, building on in-house algorithms, and people are they're piggybacking on providers like Google to kind of build that. But I wanted to bring like 2 points, which are a little more specifics in terms of that. So one is that it's may not be that appealing to the intellectual minds here, is that there is a very, very big prevalence of descriptive analytics even today in financial domain, and I believe in general. So when I say descriptive analytics, it is about describing the data. It is about describing aggregation, summaries, views, different views, trends of this data, right? These are kind of well-known products are there in the case of structured data, and there are pretty sophisticated product. In the case of unstructured data, in the case of text specifically, I do see a lot of open opportunities there. And here we are not talking about prediction. We're just telling about that what is happening over the last 7 days or the last 1 month and things like that. So that's a pretty large proportion of analytics, broader analytics, may not be machine learning, broader analytics work that I see in this world. And the other thing is, in the context of predictive analytics, and this has been mentioned a few times in the morning today, explainability and interpretability is becoming tremendously more crucial now. It was probably there even earlier, but when 10 years ago, it was probably kind of not a problem. It came with the model, right? I mean, if you are building a decision tree or a sophisticated version or a boosted decision tree or things like that, interpretability is not a problem. But probably with growing prevalence of AI, as well as more sophisticated, but probably more obfuscated models as well, interpretability is becoming more of a challenge, and it is a key task in domains like financial sector, healthcare, where you need to explain your prediction. And so very recently there was a paper by Kenneth Church, which the title said that I did it, but I don't know how. That won't work here. Anybody else?
I would like to add a couple of more use cases. I see a lot of, in different industries, personalization and recommendation coming up, right from media industry to, food or any other consumer product. Personalization and recommendation is one of the important use cases we see around. Plus, there are a lot of use cases in the manufacturing industries with which mainstream CS people are probably not aware of. Those use cases fall in the realm of IoT, where a lot of data is being collected from plants, and they want to find out when to repair certain units in the plant. Plus, there are a lot of opportunities in the oil and gas sector where people are trying to use machine learning for predicting something like crude assay.
Great. Anyone from the audience? I know there are many folks from various companies here, and we will hear from them. Anyone? Yes, go ahead.
So it's Ravi from Flipkart. I think the problem statements that we embark on in e-commerce require a real AML solves, and pretty much across the board, starting from discovery. As we sort of look to, go after the final frontier, which is the tier 2, tier 3, the discovery ought to be driven by knowing the intent, and you expect the consumer to have the least effort to be able to get to what he wants to get to, and I don't think he will have cognitive understanding to sort of go through a few folds of scrolls and then pick a product. So a fair bit of personalization, and even the modality of discovery would probably be very different. I think the textual imagery may not be the way forward. Speech is going to play a big role. Again, localized applied innovation there is a big opportunity. I also feel intent itself requires a lot of AML solve. Most of the intents are very broad in nature. That's not how one would embark on his purchase discovery in an offline store. Even if you start with a broad intent, you end up actually engage into a bit of a dialogue with the shopkeeper, and eventually get to what you want to get to. So how do you actually bring some conversational aspect in a self-service manner? That's another opportunity for AML. And of course, e-commerce is full of action in terms of in some cases we do see in some categories the quality of the listings that we have is not up to our standards, and then we're looking at few hundreds of millions of listings and combined with few hundreds of millions of imagery. How do you sort of bring some sort of a sanity from a quality standpoint? Again, computer vision, image sciences will come into play. You're talking about a lot of NLP techniques, and then most purchase decisions in e-commerce are driven by reviews, and how do you sort of make sense out of the reviews that are very liberal and generous and no semblance of standards and consistency? So can you actually bring again NLP, extract summarization, and sentiment analysis and things of that nature? And then fraudulent behavior is again another challenging aspect in e-commerce, and both from the seller and consumer standpoint, we think AML can be a big enabler there. And of course, I don't even want to get into supply chain nuances, and there's a fair bit of opportunity for AML. So I think e-commerce is here and now, and AML can really change the face of it.
You want to add to the same?
Yeah, or we want to move on?
Yeah, it's okay.
So at a high level, actually, I've been thinking a lot about also where we can use AI ML. So I just wanted to encourage everyone to think about this also, like what kind of problems you choose is very important. And as a computer scientist, some problems are very obvious and you'll find them, and it's great. We should do those, you will find them much easily. But I think we should try to kind of get out and also see who are we helping. I mean, it's a personal choice and it should be, but I think often, as happened to me as a computer scientist, you keep making lives of people whose lives are already better, much better, because those problems kind of, you are in that domain, you already reached that privilege. So I think a lot of problems, like, if you read a lot of news, like farmer suicides happening, and you try to dig in and you'll try to find that there might be some interesting ML problems there. And a lot of that is actually going outside of not talking to computer scientists actually, and talking to people in different conferences. So I think that's a great way to find, and I found many interesting problems like this, but I would think that is like a strategy where we can have broader impact and then kind of not become like the hatred of society where, we're just solving for the privileged few. So I think it's very important for all of us to think about this. Sorry, it's a broad comment.
No, thank you. And Varun himself will talk about some of the work that he has done.
So
sorry. Go
I actually, I wanted to take the conversation from there. I wanted to bring that question back to the side of what were the opportunities on the government side, for instance. And here I feel like I've been put in this panel to demonstrate my ignorance, so I'll shamelessly do that. I mean, even if we think in terms of the service delivery of public goods, for instance, right? I mean, it's obvious that there's a bunch of opportunity where we could improve the how we sort of how we help the farmers, or how the government provides information to the farmers, what the government can do to prevent subsidy leakage, and a bunch of such questions where we could actually use data in a very effective way, right? In order to decide the education policies, in order to decide how to sort of dole out different kind of, different kind of grants to different agencies. But I mean, to me, I have poked a little bit on the government platforms, on the kinds of data that are available. And to me, that doesn't seem to be, I mean, I feel that not enough thought has been put, right? So if there's anybody who in here who's more familiar with it, I'll be very happy to sort of discuss this. But I mean, what do you think about? I mean, anybody has any comment about this?
So Piyush from Google's policy team works with the government, as well as the gentleman here, Pankaj Jalote from IIIT Delhi, also does. Encourage you to talk to them, and we'll be happy to connect you as well.
Yeah, I'm happy sharing some of my experiences working with the government, especially with respect to rural development. Just a recent case where we interacted with the Ministry of Rural Development on their 700 odd skill development centers. And they have CCTVs installed in all these centers. What they need is analytics in terms of quality of training and compliance. Quality of training in terms of the attention span of students, whether the equipment that are supposed to be used are being used, and compliance in terms of whether the subjects are being taught the way they're supposed to be. Now, yeah, there are some very interesting ML problems, but to get to the point of ML, you really need to build a team. You need to accept and appreciate interdisciplinary work, and also get tuned to the style of functioning of the government. So I just feel people who want to work on ML, because for those guys to articulate the problem is quite tough. I mean, we have to find a common ground. We need to go a mile to expect them to walk that one extra mile. So this is my experience. And
just on that point, when it comes to
You want the mic?
Well, I have the mic, so let me say something before I pass it on to other Ravi.
Hold your thought, Ravi, and then the mic will come to you. But I also want to move on to other questions.
Sure,
so
sure. No, the one
maybe
thing
after
which,
you, yeah.
One thing which I was recently at the Badwani AI Institute when they started, and what I heard, surprising for you guys, is that the Maharashtra government is apparently very open, and they were able to literally walk into the chief minister's office with these ideas, and there was a lot of response from their side, right? So, and I guess there are some pockets. I know that and the Andhra government has somebody who's literally like this chief AI officer for the Andhra Pradesh government. So, and there are some pockets where a lot of change is happening from.
AI for social good workshop, and there is this guy Ashok Sudhindra, who is very
I think the big elephant in the room is getting access to data and democratization of data. I think there are innumerous problems we can come up with, and that will probably get addressed very well with the AML. Just few weeks back, Dr. DJ Patil was here, and when he was the chief data scientist for US, he worked closely with the administration, trying to sort of democratize the data access, and then he's put together a bunch of data sets in the public domain. That helped a bunch of folks to come forward and take on some of the problems that had a societal impact. I think we have a long way to go when it comes to sort of bringing data together and forming some sort of a consortium and democratizing it. I think that's going to be a.
So Ashish has something to say, and then I want to move on.
I just have one point to what Varun said. So we have actually a demo. Google Cloud, in fact, Vision API has been used to sort cucumbers. So they're helping farmers to figure out which are good cucumbers and which are bad ones, just to get them better price.
Give me the good ones for the salad.
Sorry, I don't have I'll keep it short too. So there are two different things. One is to get government sponsorship or sponsorship from NGOs or people with money to to direct your efforts to a societal good sort of cause. And there's other aspect which is actually to build systems that make an impact. And what I see there typically in a lot of service delivery, right? To make things really work, you need humans in the loop, and you need sort of pyramidal structures, like whether it's education, healthcare, trying to work on financial inclusion. You really need people on the ground with different levels of expertise and make the whole system work. And making this work, of course, there's a lot you can do with having the right type of models, like ML and data science can really drive it. If we kind of solve use cases related to modeling the capacity of people, the expertise of people in different areas. So I have not actually seen a lot of work in ML directed towards modeling people's abilities to address certain tasks, their capacity to address tasks, and sort of intermingling of this this capacity and expertise models with incentive systems. So that is an area that is worthwhile getting into, and it's sort of like orthogonal to specific application areas. So if you have solutions for this, that would sort of apply for healthcare, education, whatever be the service delivery, because you need to think of all the humans in the loop and make it work. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, good point. We haven't really talked about humans in the loop here, whole separate discussion, but I want to move on, regardless of the exact opportunity in the in companies or governments. What you need is a thriving AI ML ecosystem, right? And so I want to ask the panel, what are some key ingredients of a thriving AI ML ecosystem in your opinion? And how are we doing on those in India? And the question applies to both academia and industry. And I'll start with you, Chiru, and have each one of you take turns. Let me repeat the question.
Yeah, it's like a sentence.
What are some key ingredients of a thriving AI ML ecosystem to be able to solve these opportunities, right? And how are we doing on those in India? And both from your perspective in academia and, I'll ask from industry perspective as well.
Really tough question. And I'm sorry, I do not have a very precise answer. So it will look like a rambling thing, but I will try to keep it short. So first thing is, as everybody is saying, data, right? There are simple things we could do. When I'm saying this is, so when I'm saying this, I'm saying personally, like a researcher. See, if we take a pledge that every paper we write, I will put out the data set and the code, so if others can use, we'll go a lot. So
just reproducibility or readability?
Both. The reason I'm saying this is I was part of a Karnataka government's effort in understanding what ML can do for the state. I was the chair of the committee. So as part of the thing, this data thing came up. And then as part of the other thing was that, so recent budget, Karnataka government passed this open data initiative thing that has came out of a report, a recommendation. So something has worked. Now the people are putting into place this. So data availability of data is one thing. And I see as academia, I said, we have to do a lot. I mean, it's all right to say government not giving data, all that. That's fine. That battle we have to fight. But as also in academia, we have to do this. And when I say this, I'm not a comment to others, but comment to me, right? This is like, self thing. And the next thing is that what are you doing in India? I think India's future is pretty bright. But I think I see in the room is a great example. Most of them are between 30 to 40. I'm cross 40, so I'm not counting. And they're all there. So India's future is bright. But I would like to see that our problems, I think we are tackling on the academic side, I think, a little bit more mundane in the sense that if you put data, already some methods exist, is putting them together, which is important to have impact on the ground of today's problem.
What do you mean by mundane? Please expand.
Mundane problems, for example.
I want to create controversy here.
Yes, you want to create controversy? For example, the water supply distribution. Mm-hmm. To anybody who speak anywhere else, it's a mundane problem. What's the problem? Can I ensure, see, for example, just take a simple thing, that there is the HDI, Human Development Index, right? And one project, I always thought that how can I do this? Take an HDI, then on HDI parameters, our population should be good on this. There are clearly different parameters, no? Can ML or DI help? Having said all of that, so I was thinking that one interesting problem, I think, going forward, because you said that what would be in the future, right? I think things where, you see, most of the talks which I was here, I'm sorry I missed some of the talks, but most of the talks you see, you need labeled data, right? Now, that is hard to come by. So unsupervised learning.
Google has a human labeling service now.
Sure. So Google can do that.
No,
so unsupervised learning, and also I think the next frontier is going to be, at least academically, what I see is, you already have things which can recognize faces. This is already there. Now let us say we also have a chatbot now. That also is there. I mean, things improving, but chatbots are also there. You can talk to a system now. How about interacting these things? A chatbot's talking around the chatbot. That's the interacting autonomous system. So robotics.
There's some bad things that happened, which I heard that Facebook trained the chatbots by having them talk to other chatbots, and both become really bad. So,
which is good for research.
Which is good for research. Okay, moving on. If you don't mind, just passing on the mic.
Right.
Thank you.
I think UGC is sort of a very exciting area, especially in a country like India. And given that you can solve a lot of, talking about label data, right? You can get a lot of data pretty quickly if you get even a small fraction of our population sort of engaged. Solve problems like machine translation and understanding more about place, what have you, right? And in terms of the outlook, right? I think for some reason Indians are more than happy to participate. There are lots of things to say. Like if you look at Quora, for instance, I think for some reason we are super active on Quora, and this is true with most UGC products, even at Google. Indians tend to sort of interact very actively with these UGC products. So I think it's a big positive thing that it's a very positive thing that we have a population that's willing to engage with these products and contribute to, if nothing else, a lot of label data, to improve the whole ecosystem.
Thank you.
Okay, after data, my comment is specifically about people in the community. Though Jeff in the morning mentioned with data and 1,000 times more computation will not need scientists. But what I'm seeing is that this machine learning, AI, data science, this community is like growing like anything, right? This is by far probably the largest community in the computer science and related disciplines, right? Which is I'm very happy to be a part of it.
Do you think it's the largest or it's growing the fastest?
It is growing the fastest. Okay, let me. Okay, I don't have a number. It was more of an impression. Yeah. What would be the largest in your opinion?
Systems, I would imagine. General programming. That's what we have in Google, for example. Everybody is excellent at algorithms, data structures, systems, backend.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if you call programming as a kind of discipline, then yes, that would be the largest, probably the largest. But it's one of the fastest growing discipline. I mean, people from different fields are actually now kind of switching to data science, machine learning every time. What I kind of find is that based on my interactions with a lot of young researchers or young engineers who want to become into this field, and definitely not in this room, perhaps, is that people just kind of seeing this machine learning thing is something that, okay, they can download a software and a data set, build a few models, and that's they are an expert. I mean, things have become very easy these days in terms of kind of how you can build a model, how you can write a technique, and so that nature, which is very good because it gives you faster iteration, faster experimentation, something of that nature. But I don't know, somehow the respect or the importance towards the science or the foundation is relatively less compared to if I see probably the similar generation 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Again, I don't know if it is good. If things are becoming easy, it's probably good. More people will take it up. But at the same time, I do personally feel that it is important to understand the foundations before. Even if somebody doesn't want to become a scientist, even as an engineer, I need to, or as a programmer who wants to build data science product, I should have some foundations in this area, which I think it's the importance is kind of reducing a bit in general.
Yeah, can I make some?
Just go through the panel and then we'll have.
I mean, I'll make some controversial statements. I think we're doing extremely badly, frankly, and I think we should at this point be alarmed with it. So we have a room of 80 people here, what 80, and we already have.
As the afternoon is wearing off.
Yeah, and we already have a fairly large representation.
At the end of the day, only really serious people will remain.
Yeah, so we have. Yeah, and we already have a fairly large representation from all the active groups, AI, machine learning groups in the country. I find that distressing that a room full of 80 can handle that, right? If you look at, for instance, the number of submissions from India to any of the large AI ML conferences versus the number of submissions on China, right? Any of you who's a reviewer of AAAI or KDD or Wisdom can tell me we are doing extremely badly there, right? And even there, I mean, even submissions, all counts. Yeah, right. And I mean, there's no real reason why this has to be, right? I mean, so it's like we have a few Everests, people like Sunita, Somin, and Balaram who are doing extremely well, but it doesn't go very deep. right? It runs out of steam very, very soon. And I think we need to be sort of very aware of this and sort of think about it very carefully, because otherwise 5 years from now, we won't have enough talent to supply to the growing needs.
Thank you. That will actually go to my next question. Yeah, it will go on to my next question, but let's finish this one. Ashish, you have something?
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge is data. Even though there is data, there are serious questions about quality of the data, and I think we are not paying enough attention to quality of the data. And fortunately, in e-commerce kind of sector where data gathering is mandatory, we have a lot of data available. Otherwise, in other industry where data gathering is an optional activity, probably we do not have good quality data because that is not part of somebody's OKR or part of somebody's job. So data is a serious problem here. And I think that's the biggest hurdle in AI ML thing. And second is we do not have enough supply of trained AI ML people.
I'll come to that as a next question on how to promote the talent. But Devi, can you help with the mics? So I know there are a lot of opinions, so we'll maybe just go, in some sweeping manner.
Sure.
Just keep it with
start
you.
with Mausim because he asked me like an hour back too.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So I have several some points to make, and very quickly I'll make those. One is about so one can think about it from startups point of view, engineers point of view, and academia point of view. And from academia point of view, I think so. I'm more or less going to agree with Anil Bandel. So from academia point of view, I think we can at best say we have about 30-35 researchers in this country in academia,
including PhDs,
research. Professors.
Oh, professors, okay.
Right? And that's a tiny number compared to the global world. And if we compare with China, it has already been said, they have highest papers, highest submissions, and they want to become a world leader in AI by 2030. And I think they are well within the plan. They have a $2.1 billion investment for AI industrial park. $2.1 billion. And if you think about...
I think for a few years, the top entries are all from China in ImageNet and other.
No, I'm not even talking about research. I'm talking about startups at this point.
Oh,
they were $2.1 billion for AI industrial park, right? And from AI, think about the startup funding in our country in the last 3.5 years in AI. It's $100 million. It's very good. It's $100 million. But if you compare it against China, it's $3.5 billion. If we compare it against US, it's $4.5 billion. There's just no way we are anywhere close to what they have been at the rate that they have been moving about. We also have an urgent need to find talent. So we have globally 364,000 jobs in data science currently vacant, will be vacant by 2020. And today, about a third of the top 400 companies, not Google's, but the top 400 companies lack state-of-the-art data analysis tools and personnel. So we have
What's
incredible,
the source of all this data,
different newspapers. I had to give a talk, so I had to prepare for a talk. So I'm helping. I don't remember these statistics.
That's why we are having the whole audience discuss, because there's limited number.
And by the way, it is said that 50% jobs in India require advanced degrees. And so we really need people who get trained in AI and machine learning. And we have very few centers where people can actually retrain themselves, people who are out of college. We are doing terribly badly. And if you compare salaries in China, a senior person, when he or she comes back to China, they get $1 million a year as salary. And so they have incentive to leave whichever country they are working in and doing well to move back to China. In comparison, in India, we offer 1 crore per annum. This is again on average. And 1 crore seems really good for us, but that's actually only $150,000. And nobody's going to move from US or elsewhere on a significant salary cut, or many people won't move. So I think in many scenarios, we are actually having a lot of trouble. Think of engineers, think of startups. So I was in a government meeting and somebody said, look, we have lots of startups. They are booming. They need AI advice. Can the faculty give AI advice? And we realized that there's so little faculty and they're so hard pressed of time that nobody has the time to advise more than 1 or 2 companies. In fact, Ashwini sent me a note about 3 NLP companies and I just don't have the time. So we desperately need AI talent in academia. We desperately need AI funding in startups. And we also need AI training from so that we can produce good engineers. And last but not the least, personally, I need lots of GPUs.
Okay.
So I'll
Taking
actually
advantage
agree
of the-
with Mausam that in terms of talent, in terms of number of researchers, in terms of pretty much any metrics, if we compare ourselves with China, we're at least one, if not more than one, order of magnitude below on all these indicators. But Manish, please.
So yeah, so taking advantage of the locality. So I don't mean this to be a rant. I'll frame it in positive terms. I think what we need, yes, I agree, we need data, but I think a bigger problem, a bigger thing that we need first is courage. We lack guts to go after big things. Somehow the same Indians, when they are in the US working for Google and so on, they will kind of work on all kinds of very, very ambitious projects, but somehow we set
In
our
India
sights
also.
too low. When we are in India, somehow we set our sights too low. So I think one thing that we need more of, other things will follow. Funding, data, everything will follow. I mean, India, there should not be a shortage of data. We have 1 billion plus people. You look at healthcare problems, right? We are usually least bothered about privacy. We open up so easily. It's expected. Your uncle has every right, not just your uncle, a stranger that you meet on the train has every right to ask you about your income and kind of caste and kind of all kinds of intimate details, right? We don't care about usually deep down for privacy. So we ought to have a lot more data. I think the first thing that we need more of is courage to have the conviction to go after tough problems. The second thing that we need, and this is more as kind of what I'm looking for customers of my startup, is a mindset of accepting change, of accepting that yes, things can be done differently, and let's give a different way of doing things a chance.
Thanks,
We
Manish.
are still very, very set. The only time we adopt change is when we see somebody in the West having done it, then we say, okay, then it makes sense. We kind of somehow maybe lack the confidence, self-confidence in being the first to look at a new way of doing things.
Yeah.
Even new way of doing things, we will only adopt after they've been adopted in the West. So I think those are the fundamental things that we must change about ourselves, and then other things will follow.
Thank you. I totally agree. I think just from an attitudinal point of view, if all of us can be more early adopters and have the courage to try new things, then it will help the ecosystem. Sorry, Ravi, 1 second. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, we'll give you a chance. Yeah. Go ahead. We'll have you as well. We'll come to you.
In the queue. Yeah. Actually, I was just going to amplify Anirban's worry here and bring it down a notch. I mean, yes, we have the K2 and the Kanchenjungas and all, right? But the problem is we don't have the Nilgiris and the Sahyadris who can actually go and make a difference in your normal day-to-day operations, right? That's number one. And number two, I would not even factor in machine learning here. What is lacking at a fundamental level is even proper computer science and engineering skills that can be a foundation to learning machine learning, right? So I can talk about,
There's
okay, all right,
definitely
so
a
we
big
can
drop off, just like
yeah,
in
there's
research,
a big drop off. I mean, you can count 10 engineering colleges and then you can stop counting, right? So what are we going to do about like skilling basic machine learning engineering practices before we can start talking about all these I don't know, deep learning and the other things, right?
Right here.
Thank
Do you mind introducing yourself if you haven't yet?
Yeah, I'm Momita. I'm part of Adobe Research. So in my past life, I used to do machine learning statistical modeling for pharmaceutical industries. Sitting in US, was working on like for the more common ones, there are already medicines out there. So we would be working on things that have or diseases or disorders which have very low incidence rates. And but what I felt in India, we do have very large problems of people being affected with malaria, tuberculosis, and all of these reaching. And usually in the West, people don't address these as part of their large initiatives. So I think this is an area, hopefully AI and machine learning can help in India. And it can reach out to a larger population base.
Ravi,
comments?
Yeah, Ravi has been,
Yeah.
and then Ravi again.
Yeah, I think my take is slightly different. I think a lot of, I can speak for startups and mid-sized companies, the new age mid-sized companies, the problems they're grappling with. I think the journey on AI is started a while ago, but largely dysfunctional nature. And now I'm speaking for my own personal experience being part of Flipkart. What we noticed when I look back, though we had seeded AI first vision a couple of years ago, it wasn't holistic in nature. So when we sort of really debugged it, what we beginning to understand is, we need to sort of create this cultural transformation, AI first culture, right? Almost every problem statement, we're now beginning to look at the AI first lens. That's one. So it may not be AI may not be the answer, but start to sort of orient towards that. The second, we also believe AML skills at scale is very important, right? Today it's a hand full of data scientists, ML engineers. They come together and they only look at top end problems and so on and so forth. Third, we've seen even those guys who are sort of embarking on these problem statements probably not as well versed with business problem or domain understanding as they should be. So we need to sort of bring the domain understanding as well. And fourth, when all these three are coming in place, computing resources, I think while we could afford it, it's an afterthought, right? And that's actually crippling and constraining engineers to be able to iterate their model evolution, right? Investing in computing resources. And fifth, which is very important, somebody mentioned that, access to research. I think the industries have to have a strong connect with academia and have a strong access to research as well. And then finally, data governance. While all of us can claim we have data, the quality of the data and the correctness of the data is equally important. So, and data ingestion ought to be integral part of your solution making right at the beginning. It can't be an afterthought. So if you kind of bring all of these things together, I think we are going to be much further along than we are today. So it requires a holistic approach.
Thank you. We'll close it with this, Ravi, here. I know there are many. I have one more question for the panel, and the panel has already exceeded its time limit. So
and I know that there's one speaker in the next session who probably has to leave another next 10 minutes to catch a flight. So we should get going.
Okay. Because we are running late, that's why, right? Yeah, sorry about that.
So I just wanted to repeat a opinion that was expressed by a meeting I was part of recently, because I think it's very much apt for this room as well. So there was this meeting where people are talking about the state of AI in India, and a lot of us were going around the table and talking, literally lamenting about the state of AI in India. And the person who was chairing the meeting said, this is not an attitude that's going to help us address this. So let's all think that India has a talent pool. It's just that we need to find out the right way of skilling them, not go around saying that India lacks talent, right? So one of the biggest strengths of India is that we have people in the right demographic. We just have to find out the right way of skilling them. And I think that's it resonated with me significantly. And I think that's an attitude we should take away from this, not this downer.
No, absolutely. Actually, that was, so my last question to the panel as well as to everyone was, how do we promote ML talent in the country? To that point. Anyone? Chiru has the mic.
Chiru's going to start addressing public meetings on ML rather than then he answers.
Yeah, no, I think simple things would do. I think what in the country, a very good thing is done by Ravi and other colleagues, that IKDD conference. So we need to have more competitions. I would encourage Google and maybe some of Microsoft also here. Say, put out challenge problems. Let young minds do. Get engaged also. And faculty can also do, right? That would be one aspect. Yeah.
Any particular reason you think that these should be Indian problems? Because Kaggle exists and a lot of good data scientists are appearing.
No, what is happening? The problem is people are not getting holistic thinking. People are saying, I do a course in Coursera. I go to Kaggle. There are these code for regression code, SVM code, decision tree. I run, give me output. The basic, now when you throw them on a real life problem, they do not know how to going about thinking about this problem. And one of the things is repeated in the room is that data acquisition. I give you a problem. Why is water supply bad? That's the problem. Now, how do I model that? Whom should I go to get water? What data should I do water supply. Basically, we are involved in a project in water supply now, Bangalore City. So there's a way of thinking about it. And that thinking is not there. No, just thinking that give a challenge problem and which should not contain, and part of the problem should be what data to collect. That kind of thing, you know. So for them, go drive a car in Bangalore City, and here is like.
So let people go through the whole life cycle of the process. That's the thing. Anyone else in the panel?
Having access to talent pool is one problem, and I think we need to up our efforts in skilling as many people as possible with AI/ML. I would not expect them to write research papers, but at least understand basic machine learning process and be able to write basic models. And I think there is a lot of value for such kind of people also in the room. I mean, in the industry, we do not need all scientists with AI/ML. So I think skilling this large pool of people is something that is very, very important, and we should address it as soon as possible.
Actually, one other thing, if we want to do research, we definitely need more PhD students, and most Indian academia do not get enough PhD students. So in this room, if there are, I think, in the past, some of my students came from industry who wanted to do part-time PhD, but usually part-time PhD does not work with most of us. But many people who have a master's degree who want to maybe do a PhD, this is sort of a call for, trying to do PhDs. And
absolutely. Yeah, please.
Okay. Yeah.
Partha?
Yeah. So just following on to.
Yeah, go ahead. Partha.
Yeah. So just following on from Chiru's comment about the need to do actually concrete projects and all. So we feel, I feel like, we have this undergraduate thesis project, right? So where most of the engineering college students go through that, in some part of their 4th year period, right? So I feel like that time is underutilized, right? So if we can have some sort of a national level program, right? So where you kind of provide kind of the metrics data and have Kaggle kind of competitions there where you recognize some of the best people who do it. And when you look at people their CVs and what kind of things they do during that time, it's all in the most part, people are working on problems from 10, 15 years back because those students don't have exposure to the right problems because even their teachers in those engineering colleges are not kind of tuned with the state of the art, right? So I feel like that's kind of a good chunk of time which is available at the national level. So if you are able to structure that well, that may go a long way in improving the quality of people coming out of the system.
Wonderful. We'll have just last comment here.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so I'm Vinod from Belong. I'm also an ex-Googler. So Belong is in the hiring space. So we compute something called as the talent supply, demand supply index, right? Where we compare between the demand for a particular job versus supply, right? And interesting at this point, the biggest gap is with the data scientist role. And another way I actually sort of heuristically determine what sort of hot is by looking at the posters stuck on trees around Bangalore, right? And if you look
Scala,
at the
Hadoop
yes, of course, yeah. Over the last 10 years, right? It's evolved from Java J2E to Hadoop, Spark to now, you see deep learning and TensorFlow and stuff, right? And very interestingly,
Can you share some estimates of how many jobs do you see and how many candidates do you see in India?
Yeah, so I think I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I think on the PhD point, I think only 3% of the current people with who have a data scientist related designation, right, really have a PhD. Right, and very interestingly, many of the organizations, they want people with more than 10 years of experience, industry experience in machine learning. And I worked at Google at a point when I was not called a data scientist. I think it's still the case with people at Google, right? I was just a software engineer working on Google News ranking algorithms back then. So I was I can sort of count, the number of people, such people available, right? And so just to end on a lighter note, right? So basically, we're doing all this research at I'm seeing this demand increase. Then suddenly, my friend who's in mechanical engineering, he says he's going to switch a job, take up another role, a sales role. Why? Because he says he'll get time to do a data science course. And then, funnily enough, I go back home and my wife says she's trying to get back to a job, and she says I'm do you know there's something called as data science? I'm planning to enroll course, and there's a lot of opportunities around it. I'm well, that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years.
We will end the panel and thank the panelists.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.